My name's Nathan, I'm 28, and if you'd asked me a year ago, I would have told you my sister Jenna and I were close. Not best friend close. But I always thought there was a quiet understanding between us. Growing up in a house where our parents could barely pretend to like each other, we learned to lean on each other in the background, where it was safer. She was 2 years younger, more outgoing, always the one with a crowd around her. I was the quieter one, the one who fixed the Wi-Fi, picked her up when her car broke down, or helped her move into yet another overpriced apartment she couldn't quite afford. I never expected a thank you, never asked for one. But I also never expected this. The wedding had been in the works for over a year. Jenna and Tyler, her now husband, were one of those couples who insisted on making everything into a photo op, matching flannel engagement photos, champagne-themed proposal parties, even a live-streamed "Will you be my bridesmaid?" brunch. I watched it all unfold from a distance, invited to participate but never quite included, if that makes sense. I was always the one behind the camera, holding bags, fixing the lighting. And I didn't mind, not really. I just kept telling myself, it's her big moment. Let her shine. Still, when she asked me to contribute financially to the wedding, I was surprised. Not because she asked. I had a decent job in tech and no one else in the family was exactly swimming in money, but because of how casual she made it sound. Like it was obvious. Like of course I would. She called me one evening last spring and said, "Nate, I know it's a lot, but if there's any way you could help cover the venue deposit, it would mean so much. It's just until Tyler's bonus clears. Then we're all good." I agreed. I wired $10,000 2 days later. No big speech. No contract. No drama. Just a note that said, "Congrats. You deserve the best." That money was never brought up again. Not when the save the dates went out. Not when I wasn't invited to the tux fitting. Not when I was the only sibling not in the wedding party. I told myself maybe I misunderstood. Maybe they were keeping it small, but then I saw photos on Instagram, 10 groomsmen, 8 bridesmaids, even Jenna's college roommate's fiancé had a role. I felt the sting, sure, but I didn't say anything. My mom would have just called me dramatic. My dad? He would have shrugged and changed the subject. As the wedding weekend approached, I kept my head down. I booked my flight, took the time off work, even upgraded my hotel suite just so I wouldn't have to rely on anyone else for anything. The night before the ceremony, I offered to help with setup. Jenna said, "That's sweet, but we've got a planner." Tyler chimed in with a two-chipper, "We'll see you tomorrow, big guy." I smiled, nodded, left early. Alone. I showed up to the venue the next afternoon, a glossy, over-decorated estate in the hills that looked like it was plucked straight from a wedding influencer's Pinterest board. I walked in early, dressed to the nines in a charcoal suit, carrying a small black envelope with the actual wedding gift inside, a bank-certified check for $10,000. I figured, if they never mentioned the deposit again, I'd just make it the gift. Clean slate. The reception hall was stunning, white orchids, crystal glassware, the kind of soft lighting that makes everyone look 10 years younger. I looked around for my place card. At first, I thought maybe I was just missing it. I walked up and down the long, rectangular tables twice. My cousin Becky had a seat. So did her boyfriend of 3 months. Even Jenna's high school debate partner had a place card. But mine? Nothing. Not even a blank one. I finally asked a staff member, a kind older woman who looked like she'd seen her fair share of wedding meltdowns. She double-checked the chart and said, "I don't see you listed. Were you maybe invited just for the ceremony?" I blinked. I flew in from 2 states away. That's when I noticed Tyler's mother, Sandra, standing nearby. She'd always had this smug, performative warmth to her, like everything out of her mouth was meant to be quoted in a family newsletter. She smiled, almost pityingly, and said, "Oh, Nathan, we assumed you'd be too busy helping out or something. Jenna said you're always more comfortable staying in the background. We didn't want to make you feel out of place." I looked around again. Distant cousins, friends of friends, Jenna's yoga instructor, all seated, all smiling. My ears started ringing. I was too stunned to even speak. And then Sandra added, with that same soft condescension, "But there's always standing room at the bar, dear. That's where the fun is, anyway." Something in me snapped. I walked over to the gift table, this mountain of boxes and glittery bags and oversized envelopes, and found the one I'd brought. Sleek, matte black. Simple. I picked it up, held it in my hand for a second, and then turned to face the room. I wasn't loud. I didn't shout. I just said, in a clear, steady voice, "Didn't realize a $10,000 check only buys me humiliation. Good thing refunds exist." You could have heard a pin drop. Glasses froze midair. A bridesmaid's mouth hung open like she forgot to finish her mimosa. I turned and walked out, envelope still in hand. And just as I reached the main doors, I heard rapid footsteps behind me, heels clacking against polished marble, and then, Nathan, wait. It was Jenna, in her dress, out of breath, her veil slightly askew. She grabbed my arm with a desperation I hadn't seen since we were kids. Her perfectly done-up face, flushed from running, suddenly looked less like the Pinterest bride and more like the girl who used to sneak Pop-Tarts into my backpack because I skipped breakfast again. But whatever guilt that stirred up, it didn't last long. "Nathan," she said, breathless, "please, can we talk about this?" I raised an eyebrow. "No? On your wedding day? Weren't you busy not noticing I didn't have a seat?" She flinched, but recovered fast. "It was a mix-up. I didn't know. The planner must have." "Cut the planner excuse. Your fiancé's mom told me you said I'd be more comfortable in the background." I held the envelope loosely between two fingers. "Did you tell her that?" "Honestly." Jenna blinked. And then, in the smallest voice, she said, "I didn't think you'd mind." And there it was. That casual cruelty disguised as thoughtlessness. Like it was my fault for not wanting to be the center of attention, so that gave them permission to erase me altogether. "I didn't think you'd mind." That one sentence rattled around in my brain like a ricochet. I stepped back. "You didn't think I'd mind being treated like a cater waiter at your wedding? After funding a huge chunk of it?" Her eyes widened. "Wait, what do you mean?" I paused. "The deposit, Jenna. The one you asked for until Tyler's bonus cleared? You never paid me back. I assumed we were folding that into the wedding gift. That's why I brought this." I lifted the envelope slightly. But clearly I was mistaken. She opened her mouth, but I cut her off. "And before you try to say you forgot, I didn't need a seat at the head table. I didn't need a speech or a spotlight. I just wanted a chair. Literally 1 square foot of space to exist like a human being. And apparently, that was too much." "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said, softly. And for a second, her voice cracked. "Yeah," I said. "But you didn't care enough not to." Behind her, the music from the reception drifted faintly out. Laughter, clinking glasses, someone calling out for a group photo. All without me. All the while, the family I'd quietly supported for years treated my presence as optional. She looked down, biting her lip. "If you just come back in, I'll fix it. I'll make them bring out another chair." "A chair isn't the problem, Jenna," I said. "The problem is I never needed a spotlight, but I sure as hell expected a little respect. And after 28 years, I finally figured out that being the dependable one doesn't mean people will value you. It just means they'll use you until you're empty." She looked like she was going to cry, but I couldn't do it anymore. I didn't want the tears. I didn't want the last-minute guilt. I turned around and walked toward the valet. I could hear her call after me, "Nate, please." But I didn't stop. Not even when the valet pulled up my rental and asked, "Heading out already, sir?" "Yeah," I said, sliding the envelope into my jacket. Turns out I wasn't invited. I drove off, phone buzzing in my pocket, missed calls from my mom, a text from my cousin Emily that just said, "What happened?" And I ignored every single one. I didn't even check my family group chat. I went back to my hotel, ordered room service, poured a drink, and sat in silence. That night, around 11:45 p.m., I finally opened my texts. One from Jenna. One line. "Please don't tell Mom and Dad about the money. Tyler doesn't know you paid the deposit." I stared at it. No apology. No ownership. Just fear of the fallout. And in that moment, something inside me settled. The silence I'd endured, the, "Oh, Nate won't mind," the constant erasure, I realized it wasn't going to stop. Not unless I made it stop. So the next morning, I didn't go to the family brunch. I didn't return Jenna's message. I didn't respond to my parents' calls, either. Instead, I drove to the airport, caught an earlier flight, and spent the next week reviewing every wire transfer, every automatic payment, every shared account I'd ever set up to help my family. Utility bills, insurance policies, even the emergency credit card tied to my name that no one really used. I made a spreadsheet. I totaled everything. And I made a decision, because I wasn't going to just quietly walk away this time. I spent the entire flight home in a haze. Not angry, not even hurt, really. Just clear. For the first time in years, I wasn't second-guessing myself. I wasn't wondering if maybe I was being too sensitive or too proud or too dramatic. I had receipts, literal and emotional. And I was done pretending my generosity was some endless well they could drink from without even a word of thanks. The spreadsheet I'd started in my hotel room became something of a personal audit. I opened every bank app, every email with an invoice, every shared bill from the last 5 years. I hadn't realized just how much I'd quietly shouldered over time. It started small, covering our dad's car insurance when he got laid off. For a few months, it had been almost 4 years, paying off Jenna's last semester of college because my parents said they were tapped out. Floating the balance on a family group vacation they swore they'd all Venmo me for. They never did. I always told myself it didn't matter, that they needed me, that helping out was what family did. But helping out and being taken for granted are two different things. And somehow, over time, my entire family had decided I was just the quiet ATM that could plug guilt into and cash out from. The turning point was when I found a charge from 2 weeks ago. $194.85 for a catered bridal luncheon from some trendy bistro near Jenna's apartment. I hadn't been told about it. I hadn't been invited. But I had paid for it through the shared card my mom still had access to. The same card that had covered everything from emergency dentist visits to Uber rides when her battery died again. I didn't even get mad. I just smiled. And then I got to work. The next few days were quiet, but methodical. I revoked every secondary user on my credit cards. I froze the emergency account. I called the bank and removed myself as a guarantor on our dad's car loan. I changed the login info for the utility portals. Electricity, water, gas, cell phone family plan, everything. I waited until 7 a.m. Monday morning, just when I knew my mom would be waking up and turning on her Keurig. Then I scheduled every service to shut off that afternoon. I wanted it to be loud. Around 2:30 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from my dad. Internet down. Did you forget to pay again? I didn't answer. By 3 o'clock, my mom called. Twice. Left a voicemail. Nate, the power just went out. And the water. Can you check the account? I think something weird is going on. I played the voicemail on speaker while eating lunch. Didn't respond. At 3:42 p.m., Jenna texted, What is going on? Why is mom freaking out? I didn't reply. At 4:16 p.m., another from Jenna. Did you cancel the bills? Are you serious right now? That one made me laugh. Now it was serious. Not when I was erased at her wedding. Not when her husband's mom mocked me to my face. But now, when the Wi-Fi was down. By 6 p.m., the group chat lit up. First from my mom. Nathan, we need to talk. This is extremely immature. Then my dad. You're better than this. You're just hurting everyone. Then Jenna again. I told you I didn't mean to leave you out. This is too far. That was the moment I finally responded. I copied the balance from my spreadsheet, $63,842, and dropped it in the chat with one line. That's what I've paid for this family in the last 5 years. Itemized receipts available upon request. Then I followed up with, you don't get to ignore someone until they're useful again. That card's maxed out. Forever. Silence. For 3 hours. Then, finally, Jenna, okay. I didn't realize it was that much. I'm sorry. Can we at least talk? I almost said yes. Almost. But then I remembered the way her new mother-in-law had looked at me. The smugness. The comfort with which she dismissed me as if my existence was a footnote. And I remembered how Jenna didn't flinch. Didn't correct her. Didn't offer me a seat. So instead, I replied, I think we've talked enough. I'll forward my Venmo in case you ever want to start paying back your tab. Until then, best of luck with married life. Then I muted the group chat. Blocked Jenna. Turned my phone face down. And for the first time in my life, I sat back and enjoyed the silence, not as something I had to survive, but something I finally chose. It didn't take a week for the fallout to begin. It took 3 days. 3 days before the cracks in my family's perfect little facade started showing, and they came running not out of love, not out of regret, but because the silence wasn't convenient anymore. Day 1 had ended with muting the group chat and blocking Jenna. It was cathartic, clean, and, if I'm being honest, a little terrifying. Cutting off people you've been silently supporting for years feels like slicing off pieces of your identity. But it also felt like breathing fresh air for the first time in years. Day 2 started with a knock on my door. I live in a quiet neighborhood, mostly professionals who keep to themselves, so unannounced visitors stick out. I opened the door to find my father standing there, gray windbreaker, worn expression, and an old manila folder under his arm. Can we talk? He asked. I let him in. Not because I owed him anything, but because I wanted to see if the man who taught me how to fix a flat tire had enough humility to fix the mess he helped make. He sat at my kitchen table like it was a job interview. opening the folder and spreading out copies of bills, notes, and even some scribbled repayment plans. It might have looked impressive if I hadn't been the one who paid most of those exact bills in the first place. I didn't realize how much you've been handling, he started. Your mother and I, we got used to thinking you'd always help. I nodded. You got used to taking me for granted. He flinched, but didn't deny it. Instead, he tapped one of the repayment plans with a tired finger. I want to pay you back. It won't be fast, but I'll start this month. I've got some retirement money I can tap into early. That surprised me. My father was many things, but self-sacrificing hadn't been one of them since maybe the early 2000s. I looked at the paper, then back at him. Why now? I asked. He hesitated. Because I saw the way Jenna looked at you. At the wedding. Like you didn't matter. Like you were just an afterthought. He looked down. That used to be my mistake. I don't want it to be hers. For the first time in a long while, I saw the man who used to carry me on his shoulders through crowded 4th of July parades. I nodded slowly. If you're serious, we'll start with the car insurance. You cover the rest of the year, then we'll talk. He looked relieved. Fair enough. After he left, I didn't cry. I didn't vent. I just sat in the stillness, processing what it meant to finally be heard, not just because I raised my voice, but because I stopped speaking entirely. Then came day 3. A handwritten letter. From Jenna. Slipped under my door, in my own mailbox, which meant she'd come by and chosen not to ring the bell. The envelope had my name in her familiar loopy script. I almost didn't open it. But curiosity, that old traitor, won out. It read, Nate, I've tried calling, texting. I know you're not ready to talk. I don't blame you. I've replayed that day 100 times in my head, trying to figure out what went wrong, and the truth is, it didn't happen on the wedding day. It happened long before. You were always there for me, rides, rent, bad dates, all of it. I always assumed you'd be there, and that was my biggest mistake. Not asking, not appreciating, just assuming. Tyler didn't know you paid the deposit. I never told him because I didn't want him to feel like we owed anyone. I wanted us to look like we had it together, like we'd earned it all. But that lie cost me your trust, and I see that now. I told myself you liked being behind the scenes. I told myself you were low maintenance. But I never once asked how you felt. I never once thought about what it meant to sit through that wedding knowing you paid for it and were treated like furniture. You didn't deserve that. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. Jenna, it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't groveling. But it felt real. And that made it harder. For a week, I didn't reply. Not out of spite, but because I needed to be sure this wasn't another one of those family panic moments where they say the right things just long enough for me to plug the holes again. I waited. I watched. Then I got an email. A digital receipt. $10,000 from Jenna, transferred directly to my bank. No message. Just the transaction. Then another, this time from Tyler. Subject, apology body. Nate, I just learned the full story. I'm sorry. That's all I can say for now. But we're starting our marriage by making things right. You deserved better. Hope to prove that moving forward. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. I sent one final message in the group chat. No more payments. No more favors. If you want me in your life, you'll have to treat me like I matter. Not like a backup plan. This time, I mean it. I left the chat. I didn't block them again, but I left. 2 months later, my birthday came around. I didn't throw a party. Didn't send out reminders. I just made a reservation for one at a rooftop sushi place I'd always wanted to try and watch the city lights flicker below. Halfway through the meal, the waiter came over and placed a small box on the table. Inside was a note from someone who finally sees you. Happy birthday. It was from Jenna. I smiled, not because everything was fixed, but because, for once, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't background noise. I was seen. And I knew from now on, I wouldn't let myself fade into the scenery for anyone ever again. Not for family. Not for blood. Not even for love. I had learned painfully, fully, that being the dependable one doesn't mean you owe them your silence. It means you've earned your boundaries. And I finally had mine.